All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the Blowback Roundtable. We have a full roundtable, as everyone can see. Let's start in the top left with Don Debar. Don, thanks for joining us. He's in New York State.
Yes.
Would you care to share a little biography for everyone so we can?
Yeah. I'm in Opening, New York, where Sing Sing Prison is. It's also where the headquarters of the Maryknoll Missions is located. I'm in my late 60s. I'm a journalist, and I've been an anti-war activist and a peace and justice activist, I guess, for most of my life. I have been doing media, I guess, seriously since the late 70s. I started doing public access television. I ended up doing radio news at Pacifica Radio. I do that now, and with the Los Angeles station, I do a piece for the daily afternoon drive time news. I do political commentary, Press TV, RT, some others, and I'm a widower, and I have a small dog.
You got a golden voice, and we really appreciate you joining us. We're honored by your presence here, so we hope to hear a lot of wisdom. Ben is here in Hungary. I'm on the left coast. Ian Kummer, again, is joining us from Moscow. Are you in Moscow this morning, Ian?
Yes.
Okay. You're looking good. There's you got a good picture. Your audio's good. So internet seems to be still functioning in Moscow. That's great.
Yes, we're not banging rocks together yet. I think any day now that might happen, but not yet.
Aren't you feeling lonely?
I'm going to share a joke with you
yesterday. Something about being.
Yes, we are isolated from the global community. The other 99% of the human population is just everybody is the civilized world's never been more unified than ever before. So
I didn't know we were going to do satire today, but they
ever since the ruble turned to rubble, it's just been downhill for Moscow.
I haven't had to eat the dog. I do have a dog. I have not had to eat him yet, but I've been fattening him up a bit deliberately for when that day comes. Sorry, Spaz.
We're going to talk about the UN, but I'm going to start with a Russian joke I heard from Russian Telegram channels, which I think you'll love. It was the 2 Russian tankers take out a brand new tank given to them from the Ministry of Defense. Go on, test it, and they shoot the test sites, and suddenly there's a voice from nowhere saying, "Your wash is ready." Have you heard that one? The microchips from washing machines. It's Russians making these jokes now. Yeah, sorry about that.
Carlo, we don't want to forget about you. So you're still in DC. You're looking strong. I know you're dealing with some back issues, but I'm glad you made it today.
Yeah, thanks. I do have to leave early though because I have a luncheon appointment with Zelensky. He's in town today.
Okay.
Zelensky, yes.
Yes, we've heard.
I hear he's been sort of isolated himself. He can't speak before Congress. They won't let him speak before Congress.
Ooh, that's awful.
Oh, that's terrible, isn't it?
Well, I heard that's because he forgot to wash his pajamas before he came to Washington, so they won't let him. He's still got those stains. He's still got the the wine stains, and
they have a dress code. They have standards. Yeah.
Beggars can't be well dressed,
Craig Jardula, Pasta calls him a green screen Zelensky.
Or the Green Goblin. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, right. I like that Green Goblin.
The green screen because all this time that he was in Warsaw and other places, claiming he was in Kiev, holding down the fort, and you'd see like artifacts around his head and stuff. You could tell it was a green screen.
Yeah, he wasn't sure he was targeted or not, and so he kept a pretty low profile. And
in Rzeszów, I'm not exactly sure. Most Polish places are difficult to pronounce. But this latest UN visit, he came with the Ukrainian Air Force One, the presidential plane, which we haven't seen for like 370 days or as long as this conflict has been going on. It's been hiding in Poland all this time. Yeah. I'm wondering how much of the set, the Kiev set, was set up for him there with the air.
I think all of it.
And now Poland says they're not sending any more weapons to Ukraine. Is that true?
Poland says we're done. we're not playing with you anymore. It's
Yeah.
like Woody thrown out in the trash in the Toy Story.
See, there's a subtext to this too. I discovered this. I didn't know it. I mean, I knew sort of vaguely, but I didn't realize the extent of it. The farmland that's under the control of Kiev has been sold off in the main already to the biggest ones are what was it, the Vanguard and
BlackRock.
There's a big trust, NCH Holdings or something. So in other words, the grain that we're talking about, the Ukrainian grain that has, everybody's worried about and everything, and it's being dumped in Poland and in Hungary and elsewhere, actually is Vanguard and other American corporations.
It's U.S. profits. You're right. I read a thread about that too. Yeah, they're not being dumped in Hungary, no bloody way, and they're not being dumped in Poland at this moment.
Yeah, I like Orban. You guys got a good president, man.
Thank you. But they are being dumped in Bulgaria, where there's a massive uproar. By the way, the farmers are blocking the main road, saying, "Why don't you support us instead of the Green government?"
I would take, and I've thought about this news from Poland, and I would suggest take it with a grain of salt, because there's two reasons for that. One is so we know at this point there are significant numbers of Polish quote unquote volunteers in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And they have taken significant casualties. We know they're the number one country besides Ukraine and Russia in numbers of casualties. So they've taken the highest for any third country. It could be anywhere from 2,000. And actually, there was this news this week in the Polish media actually claiming that they've taken 10,000 KIA. And most of them are reservists, because they did do that partial mobilization last year under pretext of, their annual training exercises. But the suspicion is they're feeding reservists into it, which would make sense because they're per capita the leading arms supplier for Ukraine. So it's very believable that they're just putting Polish troops in those Polish tanks. It would make sense. And that's my first reason for saying taking that with a grain of salt, because if you're going to cut off the arms supply, well, what does that mean? You're also cutting off your own guys. You're cutting off the guys helping your guys, causing more casualties for yourself. Or does it mean they're pulling out? So it's difficult to believe the story. And also we have to bear in mind next month is their election cycle. So they might be, because of the uproar with the grain, saying, oh, we're done. And then once the elections are over, carry on. So that's a possibility.
I hear you. That makes sense too. Also, my understanding is that NATO Op Center, headquarters is Poland, basically. That's where they're staging, they're running the war from. And so I'm assuming that means a lot of the material comes in there and gets shipped out. And we're talking the United States is in charge of that, not Warsaw. So,
Yeah, there's been pictures. This is social media, so not that much verified, that the police are being strengthened by U.S. military police. So, take it with a grain of salt. But there's video and photo evidence. So it's very much not a lot of Polish left in Poland. It seems to be the next control center. But keep in mind a couple of things I want to add to this. One is the election cycle. Second is the big grain debacle. I think these are important aspects. But the third is, since last year, these guys have been building the largest army in Europe. They've been very outspoken about it. And most of that is IMF loans, obviously borrowing from the EU and South Korean banks. So it's all on borrowed dime at this moment. They're going to be the debtors, already are the debtors of the world. And what's the center of Europe? Germany. So just a couple of motions here. Zelensky came with his peace plan. It doesn't matter. But what part of it was reforming the UN? And reforming the UN was obviously getting rid of Russia from the Security Council, but putting Germany in. And who rebelled against it the loudest? It was the Poles. They said, we got to stonewall this. We got to, no, none of this. They still owe us reparations from World War II. They're on about that 1.3, I don't want to lie. Is it billion, trillion? It's a big
trillion.
Yeah.
It's trillion.
I mean, this is what did you start with? We are more unified than ever. Europe is tearing itself apart along the seams. This is just one of those seams.
I think that letter got sent around the Polish government for approval. Hey, what do you think of this? And different people approved it, and people kept adding zeros to the end. I like it, but throw another zero in there. It's good. Now it's 1.3 trillion. Yes.
What are people's perspective about the strategy at the UN? Because didn't the West convene this week's meetings? They call it a debate, But I watched it yesterday, and it didn't seem like a debate. I mean, it seemed like a piling on of the pro-Western. So Ben, you suggested that it's about trying to reform the UN and give the West more freedom to do what they want by removing the Russian veto. Do you think go ahead.
That was Zelensky. That was isolated. That is Zelensky alone. I don't think he was following the line, and I'll give you a couple of reasons for it. He already called Putin the next, the next Hitler. That was before he even arrived. Okay, and that means I cannot have peace talks with him. That's what that means. Even though the US is now very keen on them to have peace talks, he said no. He's rebelling in that way. Then he arrived, and immediately the one story came out in the New York Times, and then the BBC followed it, that the recent missile attack, Ian, I think you would be more familiar with this, on the Donetsk region, on that market with innocent civilians. The New York Times, for 570 years, they've been saying Ukraine's winning everything. Well, that rocket was Ukrainian. That was a book Ukrainian missile, and the visual evidence confirms it. That, to me, looks like a shot across the bow, saying you misbehave, you get this kind of shit. But when it comes to the next, unfortunately, with Billy Bob, I was unfortunate to watch this session of the UN, and they brought up the president. It's an Albanian guy, and he was the worst kind of. It wasn't geopolitics. Usually it is. It's about agreements, issues, all that. This was all about emotion. It was all about rhetoric. Nothing else. He brought up, because you guys have been talking about religious figures. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Niemöller was the German priest man who said first they came for these people and that I didn't speak
the
up.
Georgians, and then
I think it was first they came for the communists. First they came for the communists, then they came for.
Yeah.
And this guy, after bubbling Joe Biden, he said that first they came for Georgia and I didn't do anything. Then they came for Crimea. I didn't do anything. It was far away. Then they came for all of Ukraine and I didn't speak up. And then they came for me. So they're using this emotional, horrific language. And one after the other, we saw the puppets exactly towing the line. Exactly. But this is just my conclusion. We don't have to go into detail. It was all preemptive. They were all defensive, saying we can't go back to the roots of the conflict. We can't divide into the world of who's at fault and who's not. We have to be unified. All preemptive of what Lavrov's going to say, because Lavrov's going to say, "Hey, you better get your bloody facts straight," and he did a lot later on, which I watched today. But it was all preemptive. It was all defensive. Was my key takeaway. And by the way, the second big story said to practically no one. 3/4 of the podium of the auditorium was empty. There's a couple of these shots. It's almost empty. Nobody really. It wasn't packed.
He's not a popular cat. No, the UN. This issue of the veto and also reconfiguration of the Security Council. I've followed the UN for maybe the last 15 years or so. I've had an account with the UN multimedia and blah blah blah. And I kind of have a long, view of some of the games that are ongoing there. First of all, they can't amend, they can't take away the veto power without, I think it's a 3/4 vote in the General Assembly. Some unattainable thing. I don't remember what the number is. And so a lot of that, the foundational thing is, the public thing is posturing. It's, politicking. There are other operational aspects to each country's membership that are within the hands of either the Secretary General's office or various committees and agencies of the UN, where if they don't like you, they can screw you around. You can't sit in on these meetings, or you can't be a member of that committee, or et cetera, et cetera. And some of those are of some consequence. For example, when they were signing peacekeepers and things to different countries, if everyone that's on the ground there is a member of a NATO country or something, and say it's in Ukraine, the peacekeepers or whatever, that matters, as opposed to, say, a joint Russian-Polish force or whatever that you might have there. So, but in terms of changing the charter, foundational stuff, they need there were 2/3 or 3/4, but I think it's a 3/4 vote in the General Assembly. General Assembly consists of 192, 193 nations, whatever it is, and
an unattainable majority. We could say.
I mean, you take they'd get a majority, but not enough. Because if
Well,
you
I
take a look at,
read that even that would be subject to a Russian veto. That the veto power would apply
process,
to the General Assembly vote. It would take more than just the majority. It would take a majority, and nobody uses their veto. That's what I read. I don't know if that's
I think
true.
you're right.
You.
I think you're right. But
So that's why it doesn't seem
let's-
possible to do any kind of reform in the way that the West would like. In which case, maybe it's all a ploy, a strategy to declare the UN useless, and then initiate this other kind of international group, a coalition of the willing to do things outside of the UN. But I think we'll find out. I think it'll be clear in the coming weeks and months exactly what their strategy is. This is the picture that. Go ahead. I'll go ahead, Ben.
Maybe three or four more people were there when Zelensky spoke. Not a lot more, but this is Pirate Schultz. That's Olaf Scholz talking to him. Barely. The Bild magazine opened with this, and something surprising since we're talking about the UN SC, the Security Council reform. Annalena, where is she? 360, 560, 450, whatever degrees she's at. She came out absolutely in support of Russia's position.
Who is this?
US.
Who?
Sorry. Annalena Baerbock, the German.
I know who she is.
Support of Russia.
Foreign minister. Yeah.
In support of saying no, we don't want to remove Russia from the UN Security Council. So she came out against the Zelensky proposal, which was fantastic. This morning it was either the Bild or Tight, one of those.
Wow,
that surprised me because
counterintuitive.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention about what's happening now at the UN in the context of what goes on there, you usually have in the Security Council the same kind of break. The Security Council has 5 permanent members and 10 additional members that are on a rotating scale, and a total of 15 members. And the 5 permanent members have the veto. I don't know the membership now off the top of my head, but there's a slight majority. I would say a little more than a slight majority of U.S. and EU allies on the board now. It's even more than a slight majority because a couple of the members have been captured. I think Ecuador is one of them, for example, and so which is now a U.S. puppetry instead of
I think the Ecuadorian speaker was the second or third to speak, for obvious reasons. Yeah.
And what happens is what you're looking at is pretty much the same, excuse the expression, shit show that they have. What you're seeing now is kind of pretty much what happens all the time. It's like a lot of people refer to it as a debate club, sort of in a pejorative way, but also functionally, that's what a lot of it is. That this is like this is one of the media outlets and one of the news items that is followed around the world and translated into the languages around the world, sort of, as it comes out of there. And so there's, a class of people in the world that are watching this all the time. And so this shit show basically is being produced for them. And there's a lot of like movers and shakers and, people that are influencers or whatever the goddamn word is. And so that's, a lot of it is to convince them something is true, false, dangerous, whatever.
Yeah, they're presenting this illusion of unity, and everybody opposes Russia. The entire world knows that it was an unprovoked invasion. Yeah, right. Again, thank God Lavrov was there to speak some truth. Like he was the adult among these child brain idiots. That guy from Albania really was shocking to me at the very beginning. He was. What did he say? Like, just get your troops out of Ukraine, and then you won't have to, not want Zelensky here. It's like, oh my God. Yeah. I was kind of shocked.
On Don's point, I completely agree. It feels like it was made for a domestic U.S. audience because Joe Biden, in his bumbling thing, it wasn't just Russia is bad for everything. Only Russia is responsible for everything. But he also said the usual human rights. Zelensky actually did the Greta Thunberg thing. He went into the environmental, the green stuff. He talked about the energy, not just the grain wars, but the energy wars. And Russia is exporting its substandard nuclear technology and creating nuclear dirty bombs abroad. I don't know where the fuck that came from, but that's not meant for international audiences. It was one of those moments,
Well, I mean, it could be meant for a European audience that is deindustrializing and denukifying right now. That could be, because I don't think Americans actually care that much about the UN. Just being honest here.
Yeah, there's a big debate, especially in Germany, that we should embrace nuclear energy, and maybe that's forget about it. Remain green.
That could be. This could be for them. I think I'm going to be honest. I think Europeans take the UN more seriously than Americans do. So if I had to pick an audience this was meant for, I would say it's for them.
No, but
nobody knows what Albania is in the USA. For God's sake.
I do, because it's not far, but in the US,
content. This is content that's produced and then aired. They slice little pieces out of it for CNN and MSNBC, and so they are speaking to American audiences. What's presented is selective. They don't see the whole show. People around the world do see the whole show, though, and people here too. Not a lot of them, but some of us do.
Yeah. Can we quickly talk? This was interesting to me. This morning, 2 headlines came out, kind of the results. First one I saw in Asia Times, and I think it was kind of shocking to me that what it said was, I'm just going to quickly find it. Not just, sorry about this. Fuck, Asia Times, it was at the top of my list. Oh yeah, Biden failed to convince Zelensky at the UN to negotiate. I thought the US pretty much owned Zelensky, and yet it looks like he failed to convince. But the first sentence was he might be going to Washington and maybe get a new congressional arms sale, but it will be the last time. There's probably not going to be another one. That was the first paragraph of this one.
Where is this?
This is Asia Times.
Oh, okay.
That's where that came out. I can send the link. But the second link was big, called The National Interest, big magazine. And the title was, Yes, Joe Biden is corrupt. That came out this morning.
Wow.
That's some interesting follow-ups after a busy day at the UN. I was wondering if you have thoughts about that and maybe the effect of these.
I do. Whoever wants
go
to go first. Okay, so I wrote this actually the previous time. What month was that? When was his previous visit to Washington? I brain dumped that. The last where he made that big show. He gave
with the flag at the Congress, the signed flag. I don't know the month, but I remember it. It was
big. When that happened, I wrote on the blog that I was, I looked at that, especially that conversation between Zelensky and Biden, where I made the comparison that if you visit a big tourist trap in Russia, like St. Petersburg is very famous for this. There are these con artists. They have this little artistic show, like they'll have pigeons or something like that. And they pretty much scam you into giving them money, get you into this trap. Oh, you need giving more money. Well, that was basically what was going on with Zelensky. And to me, Zelensky did not look like a puppet. He looked like a con artist scamming somebody. If anything, I would say Zelensky was in control of that visit, not the USA. Very much
December,
like he was
Don says in chat. Yeah, I remember because there was a horrible hug between Nancy Pelosi and Zelensky. I will never forget that. I wish I could.
Yeah.
So this might be pushback. This might be pushback from the American this political establishment that he's not getting all this fanfare. And I also noticed this, because throughout the whole counteroffensive, like on every social, because I'm a bit of a social media junkie, every social media feed was flooded with the algorithm, all these stories about Ukraine is winning, all of that tapered off this week, all of it. Even though
it's gone.
Even now that they're claiming that they're actually had a somewhat significant gain of breaking through the first line, they're not pumping it up at all. Not at all. There's a couple, CNN articles, but they're not pumping that up. So that, to me, that's from the Ukrainian perspective, very concerning that you're not seeing this corresponding information, because in the information sphere for any kind of military conflict, you need to hype your successes. So that's a tangible success. You can show on maps, they broke through the first line of defense. They got through his dragon teeth and minefields. They should be pumping it up. They're not. It's very
I just want to remind the viewers, Ian, that you kind of are an expert because you did this for a living, right?
Yes, Army Public Affairs for about 10 years. So yes, so when you talk about a military operation, you talk about your information ops. You have your internal and your external audiences. So you have your public affairs people talking to your own journalists, your own audiences and voters, And then you have basically your PSYOPs people talking to neutral and enemy audiences. So none of that seems to be happening.
True.
They're not exploiting that breakthrough, because when you have a breakthrough, you need to exploit it, both physically and mentally with information. They're not doing that. It's very strange. It's almost unprecedented.
2
It's
weeks
extremely
ago.
unprecedented.
2 weeks ago, it was hyped as the first line of defense, but as we've learned, it's nowhere near the Surovikin line, the original lines of defense. But what they did was they are still fighting over like little villages, population of what. And talking about PR agent, this morning, Sarah Ashton Cirillo, the transgender person in charge of relieved and under investigation, which was an interesting wrinkle to wake up to, because just in this last week, she said, we're going to hunt down all...
Clip to play again. That was just such an awesome clip, the gnashing of teeth.
Absolutely. We're going to hunt you down wherever you are, you Russian propagandist. She even addressed, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova as one of those propagandists in the last video to be aired before this suspension.
Before she got canned, yes.
You know what's great? But that gnashing of teeth thing, if you look at Luke 13:28, in that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, and I'll pass over it, but yourselves being thrown out.
We are going biblical today, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah.
So this is your daily Bible reading with your local atheist.
But there's some people, maybe they're not in the loop, how far they're out of the loop. But Yuri Ignat, who is the commander of the air forces in Ukraine, this morning, he said, well, we have to think to the future past the F-16s, and we would like F-35 high-tech, fifth-generation fighters, and we would like Swedish Gripens. You know, I don't know, send the USS Enterprise, the Millennium Falcon, send Battlestar Galactica, just get it over with, send them all, send them everything. I don't know, he's not got the memo. Thoughts?
They're running out of the problem. I think they're running into also is they're running out of excuses for why they're not winning, because we have sent them just about everything. Because always the excuse was, well, that's because they don't have the good weapons yet. Well, they have the only mainstream weapons they don't have at this point are the F-16 airframe and the Abrams. That's it. And they have plenty of equivalents already.
And the Atacms, remember, which the Fox News apparently spoke to an anonymous official saying they're not going to send it. I'm not sure how reliable that is.
I don't think it's entirely possible they just don't have Atacms to send, because even the GLMRS, the standard GLMRS for the HIMARS, is hard to come by. It's not, and they really had to scrape the bottom of the bin to get even what they're sending to Ukraine to support this counteroffensive. And so Atacms just might not. They might have just talked to the logistics people and they just said, "Hey, it's not happening. We cannot keep our own stockpile at an acceptable level and support Ukraine. It's not happening."
Oh, and go against Taiwan, which would be a very interesting thing.
You got my perspective is that if they gave Ukraine the wherewithal to, be in the skies, to rid Russia of domination, air domination, you're basically fighting for. I mean, to Russia, dominating the air over Ukraine is almost the same as dominating their own airspace, and so, in the midst of this battle, so. If you're going to give them the wherewithal to, start taking out the Russian Air Force, first of all, Russia has to assume that it's not going to stop at the border. I mean, I think it's been demonstrated it's not going to stop at the border. They took a swipe at the Kremlin and they've been bombing inside Russia proper, here and there for a while. So recently, even if they give them F-16s or if they can find the other ones that and give them some of those.
Yeah, the lost F-35.
We're going to have to take them out like the minute they show up.
Which is what they did with the original Ukrainian Air Force, which was a very well equipped Air Force. If you believe the Russian Ministry of Defense, there's about 400 fighter jets, twice as many helicopters, just gone near the first week of this action.
That's what we have to do.
Well, here's the thing too. I'll invoke the Cuban Missile Crisis in October and November of 1962. There's this Russian precedent for not publicizing their victories in negotiations, because in that case, both sides withdrew. They withdrew missiles from Cuba, and we also withdrew missiles from Turkey.
Yes.
But the Turkish withdrawal was not publicized. So with these attack-ins, it might be entirely possible that someone in the back room said, if you send attack-ins, there's going to be consequences. We're not kidding. But they didn't publicize it. So it's just, it doesn't look like egg on the USA's face. They said, we won't tell anyone, just don't do it. And so that's a possibility.
Face saving is part of the equation. I mean, what was written in Washington Post, this was yesterday, that the US plans, I think, comparatively tiny, 320 million aid package to Ukraine. I mean, compared to the previous one, that looks awfully tiny to me. That looks diminishing. And this morning, I think this is reliable. It looks like Mark Milley's gone. He's going to be replaced by an Air Force, as the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's replaced by someone with command experience in the Air Force in the Pacific Theater. And just a third wrinkle to that, thoughts after that, is something I watched, just read this morning in the Wall Street Journal opinion, big money thing. And well, the title is misleading. It said the Taiwanese are worried that the US will abandon Ukraine, but it's written by one of these guys, for the CS, the strategic, it's the MIC. Right, the military industrial guys who want to sell weapons everywhere. One of their directors have written, and it's mostly about we need a two-front strategy. We need to pump everything everywhere. So it's not that much. Let's not abandon Ukraine. It's let's attack everyone at once. Thoughts?
Well, one thing, that $320 million, a lot of it's going to fund pensions of retired Ukrainian officials and salaries. So it's not all military oriented. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, probably. And disabilities. There's recently been numbers coming out of how many crippled people are going to be in Ukraine. Just based on that, the casualties are horrendous.
Well,
my guess is those disabled get cut off within a year or two after the conflict ends. That's my educated guess.
Well, you're not going to get it in Poland. We already know that. In 2024, past January 1, 2024 at least, none of those things are coming to them.
I keep tweeting to Zelensky. He's in the Twitter feed every day with some new nonsense.
Has he ever responded to you?
No, not directly, but I know they're reading it. At the most recent thing I've been doing, I got a picture of Saddam with a rope around his neck and a picture of Manuel Noriega with his mugshot. And I'm saying this is the CIA's retirement plan, and I got his picture next to him. I don't know what they told you.
Do you know what I did a year ago? And I was proud of it because Pepe Escobar shared it. He's one of a good geopolitical analyst from Brazil. And I have two pictures in front of the nice, cozy fireplace in the White House. And one was Ashraf Ghani, the guy who escaped from Afghanistan with the suitcases of money. And the second was Zelensky, a much smaller Zelensky, sitting in that exact same room in the exact same
that's
thing.
perfect.
So with the Milley story, so I will say that's another story that when it comes to things like troop rotations and also rotations of people in these senior posts, that happens regardless of the conflicts going on. So that your top sergeant major and your top general officer in the Pentagon, those are rotating posts. I don't remember off the top of my head how long Milley's been in that position, but if he's going out the door, that's not necessarily related. We also have to remember these are administrative and political roles. They're not, General Milley is not pointing at a map telling soldiers what to do in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So battlefield failures would not be associated with him. No one would even suggest they were associated with him. So to me, it's all 99% chance it's totally unrelated. It's just, it was his time to retire.
What about the administration thinking that Milley isn't politically hawkish enough and they want to get somebody more aggressive? Is that a plausible thought?
No, it's not. I mean, anything's possible, but it's unlikely because again, it's just his job is just to bob his head up and down, So I have not seen him pushing back at all. So
yeah, he's a political animal more than a lot of military people say that more than military animal. So he's there to play a role. Just better than Zelensky. Just a small detail on that very same story. The Rammstein format in Germany's airbase, the NATO Ukraine contact group, was just concluded. Milley was there and he let it slip, I think, 3 or 4 days ago that this is his last Rammstein meeting. So whatever the reasons are, he already knew he was out or he was on the way out. I don't know if he's going to go to another post or just gone, replaced with this new guy. But
he'll join the MIC. He'll be a multimillionaire.
Yeah.
He'll get
Oh.
he'll get a cushy consultant gig or go into Raytheon or something, guaranteed.
The revolving
He'll
door
be fine.
never stops revolving, does it? Yeah. Well, maybe we can transition to actual diplomacy, because when Lavrov came on the scene and dismantled all of this crap, since then his speech has ended. I wish I had a picture of that, but he has commenced BRICS, a BRICS Plus, a BRICS 11 it's called now, meeting on the sidelines of the UN at New York. Okay, and this is what actual discussion looks like. It's not televised. I'm waiting for the readouts, but basically, yeah, let's sit down, and after that fucking show, let's do some real stuff. But he had some choice words, saying basically the West does not want to talk about the origins, the details, the facts of this war, because they're not up for a debate. They don't want to. What about Ukraine strikes you as because it's democracies versus autocracies? Which one do you think Ukraine is? They have televised their plans for the Russians in the Donetsk region. So what do you think will happen if we pull up? That was at the UN, but now there's this new meeting. And two amazing meetings are taking place today. Both of them I've seen short videos of. I'll just mix them in and get your thoughts, okay? First was Wang Yi, the current highest diplomat in China, the foreign minister, who one day after meeting Blinken where did he meet him? Malta, somewhere here around Europe. He immediately flew to Moscow. He met with Lavrov. He met with the intelligence guy. Help me, Ian. Jesus.
Oh, not right. It's blank.
Doesn't matter. I always maybe Nikolai Patrushev.
Felix Juravsky. No, that was the old guy.
Nikolai Patrushev. He's intelligence and national security guy.
Oh,
okay.
mhm.
And today he's meeting Putin in St. Petersburg. Probably big discussions there. They're talking multipolarity. They're talking about the old rules-based system being obsolete. Who made the rules? Fuck all that. Lavrov is doing the same. And the same thing is happening in Beijing, where Bashar al-Assad, the leader of Syria, the western part of Syria that is still independent, arrived as a leader should. Wish we had a proper video clip. We don't have this time, but that's Air China 1. That's a Chinese presidential plane that was lent to him. And there was this big crowd of dancers. And I don't know why the Chinese have these cute blow-up mascots, but they have those in the background and flowers and representatives meeting him. 19 years. Okay, 2004 is the last time he went to China. And that's isolated no more, pariah no more, exactly like Putin and Lavrov. Hello, Dust. So there's actual big meetings going on in the world while this, and I think they will have much more consequence, including, I don't want to sidetrack what I've just said, but maybe, Ian, you can address a little bit about the 24-hour war over Nagorno-Karabakh, the Azeri. I'm not very well informed. I know about Nikol Pashinyan's shady behavior the last weeks and months, but not much more context is available to me.
Well, so that's, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I was meaning to bring that subject up of Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Go on that one.
So the issue is that, yes, Armenia, like you can even look at polls done with Russian people, and you'll see, as amazing as this might sound, Armenia is considered, one of their top 2 or 3 allies. And when Russians say that, though, they're generally referring to specifically Armenians. Their government, it's not the same story. There's not a whole lot of trust of that administration, which is widely suspected to have been installed as a color revolution in 2018. And they've been acting like one.
A quick addition, detail to what you're saying, just to amplify a point. It's a divided society, because I've seen 2 videos ever since this happened. One was a big crowd gathering at the presidential palace saying, "Out with you, you fuckhead." And the other gathering at the Moscow embassy, who think the Russians are somehow at fault for all of this. So it seems to be whatever way there, it's a divided society.
Well, they're not mutually exclusive. A lot of people, especially internationally, can say, "Hey, why isn't Russia doing something?" And Armenians could also be blaming their own government. They're not mutually exclusive. I wouldn't even say they're necessarily opposing sides. The problem is that it would be multiple reasons for Russia to tread carefully, because one, they want to play nice with both Azerbaijan and Armenia, and particularly Azerbaijan, because they, unlike Armenia, actually share a border with Russia. And to even think about militarily intervening or even punishing Azerbaijan for taking that disputed ethnic Armenian territory what are they going to do? They'd have to go through Azerbaijan to get to, there's no other friendly country that they could even go through. And the other thing is that if they get directly involved, aside from what they're already up to their necks in with Ukraine, they can expect an equal NATO pushback. Because regardless of what NATO says, we all know the second Russia picks a concrete side in this, NATO will take the opposite.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah,
doesn't
they've been
matter
very
what
careful.
they said. Yes.
Maria Zakharova was very careful.
They
By the way,
U.S. troops that they were doing some war games or some
Yes.
maneuver or something with Armenia last week, I think, very recently.
yeah, it was the 19th the war broke out, and it was going from the 11th to the 20th. So it was one of the last days of that exercise that this thing broke out. You were right, Maria Zakharova was being very diplomatic on this, but there have been some Russian peacekeepers killed in the Nagorno-Karabakh area. And to this morning, I read in TASS, there was a readout of a phone call, not Pashinyan, but was the other guy, Aliyev, President Aliyev.
He apologized.
Absolutely apologized. Then it's going to have investigation, and we're going to find. So it was a very a sensitive thing. Not as much as Turkey shooting down that MiG so many years ago. Not that kind of fallout, but it's bad. And I want to say that this is the Caucasian region. People might not be familiar. It's not that far from me. I've never been, but still, it's not just Russia and these little Georgias there too, but it's Turkey, Iran. All of these big, powerful regional nations have interest in this area. It's not going to be quite the same. Yeah.
Border, for example.
So do we all kind of agree that it was a color revolution in Armenia against basically the interests of the Armenian people themselves? The U.S. got one of its puppets installed, and they had this long-term goal. I mean, in 2018, I believe there was policy papers written by the RAND Corporation and other MIC, affiliated, think tanks saying we need to, put pressure on Russia by destabilizing this region.
It's a provocation, yes.
Yeah, Brian Berletic has pointed out the consistency between their written strategy, their written agenda, and then what actually happened with the color revolution. And then there was another war. Was that like earlier? There was another little conflict there, like a year ago or so, that got resolved, and then it flared up again. But it does seem like what's going on with the Armenian government is that they are really reaching out to the West, right? They're saying, hey, we want to get rid of, Russia protecting us, and we want NATO and the U.S. to be our big sugar daddy, and that's what the government in Armenia is trying to do. Is that basically what everybody
agrees? I wouldn't say it's a result of a color revolution, but when it comes to Nikol Pashinyan, I would say that's exactly the case. I mean, immediately he embraced Zelensky. He's going to send arms. He sent his little wife to Kiev. He wants to be part of the EU, get out of the CSTO. He what we call his representatives from there, and absolutely pivot westward. But Ian I have surface level.
I would say it's not even, I have surface level as well. I've just visited Yerevan a couple of times. I would say it's not even a strategic decision, because if it was a strategic decision, you'd say, okay, at least there's some sort of sense to it. The Armenians say, okay, NATO is a better partner than Russia. If that was a decision made through logic, it wouldn't necessarily be better. I think the problem is that it was just corruption, and they were paid off, and I think that'd be much worse.
There's also
and walking around Yerevan, there's USAID everywhere. There's NGOs everywhere. It's amazing how much money, considering how small this small landlocked country, it's amazing how much. It's actually got one of the largest embassies.
That was gonna be my next question. Tell me the size of their embassy. Yeah.
It's huge. I believe it's like the second or third largest in the world. It's amazing. It's incredible considering it's a tiny little country of like 4 million people, if that. So, the U.S. got what it paid for, essentially. So I think they just bought out the government, and then you have Russia making some sort of calculated decision. It's entirely possible they might have just realized that that disputed region is it's indefensible. Azerbaijan can have it.
Correct me.
Go ahead.
Correct me with your knowledge, but I don't think there's a dispute anymore. And I want to hear from Don later. I'm sorry to keep cutting into you. But it's no longer disputed, because this guy, this Nikol Pashinyan, he said, well, that land pretty much belongs to Azerbaijan. And since he's withdrawn from the CSTO, Russia sees no responsibility other than the safety of its peacekeepers, absolutely no responsibility to save anyone at this point, and they don't seem to have a legal one.
I think
Am I
that's
wrong on
correct.
Yeah.
Armenia has not even mobilized their own army in response to what's happened in the past few days.
Yeah, no. And it was just a 24-hour, what do you call it, anti-terrorist operation. And some of those cars, I mean, military gear had Z's on them. Like, look, we're going to do the same thing, kind of. I don't know. It was a strange thing that, again, surface level knowledge.
So just
Don, you had a bunch of...
to the point of like this conflict has been kind of like bubbling over a period of time. You know, I had that understanding of it also. I did an interview with Mark Sloboda Tuesday, I think, and he pointed me in a lot of detail, basically, that this has been going on since Roman Empire versus Persia.
Yeah, thank you for not pinning it on Stalin. So many people do that now.
There's like a break point there, and there's an affinity with the Armenian people and the Russian people over religion as both Orthodox countries, so that all of these things, I don't know how they factor in. I've never been to Armenia or Azerbaijan. Also, the only time since like the Roman Empire that there hasn't been some tension there was while they were both in the Soviet Union, except at the very end, that was one of the conflicts that was stirred up. Yeah. But so that's kind of the context that a lot of this other crap goes on too. It's easy to excite some tensions there because there's a historical, aspect to it.
It's like former Yugoslavia. It's easy to stir, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what they do.
Didn't the Armenian president state outright that area belongs to Azerbaijan? Like, didn't he just throw in the towel and essentially said? So
that was
yeah. So once that's stated, like, there's no conflict. Everybody agrees that territory, the government of Armenia agrees, the government of Azerbaijan agrees that territory that has a lot of Armenians living in it is Azerbaijan territory. So it's, I think that guy is the problem. I think the president of Armenia is the problem.
Oh, I agree.
But but he's kind of the solution too, because he's settled the matter, and so
Russia's settled the matter. I think that's the while all this shit show is going on at the UN, Russia's brokering peace deals in Russia and China, Iran and Saudi Arabia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. It's an interesting
major
thing
point
to watch, and it's not reported here at all.
Yeah, I mean, the Yankees are going to be out of Syria very, very soon. They thought they had the Saudis maybe on court, maybe they had the Emirates on court, and they both said, "Fuck you, no, you're out of here. This is the Arab region, and we want, Syria back." And now China has recognized Syria. I can't just say how huge that is. The real diplomacy going on in the world. But speaking of irrational,
Petro Juan.
Sorry,
can you say Petro Juan?
Petro Juan, I'm not sure, but it's been almost 2 years of the special military operation. And I read somewhere in the financial press that 25% of the world's trade is now in yuan, in renminbi, in the Chinese currency. Yeah. 1 quarter in just less than it's faster than I ever imagined, is what I can say about that. Really, really fast.
You know what I learned when I was in China in this past summer in July? They pronounce it yen.
Oh, they say yen. Then I'm the stupid foreigner for the yuan. Okay, it's yen.
I don't see yen looking at YUAN, but that's how they pronounce it.
Yuan, I guess. Yes. But they mostly say renminbi, which is the people's money.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that
on it too, by the way,
is as of last year, I think it was. I'm just pulling this off the top of my head. The U.S. dollar reserves in the world's currency had dropped for the first time. Well, it had dropped more than the past 20 years combined, and it's now below half. It was at around 47%, if I remember correctly, which is go Team Biden. That's something Bush, Obama, Trump could not pull off. Biden did more than all of them to de-dollarize.
I don't mean your personally, but the 4 Americans around me. So did your strategic oil reserves, and you're heading towards 33 trillion of debt.
Yes, he's
beautiful.
Well, Ukraine is, I think, can be said with some degree of confidence to be the most expensive war in American history, which is pretty astonishing. About a war that we're officially not involved in. It's the most expensive war in American history. When you look at it, when I say that, just let me clarify, I mean that on a yearly basis. Of course, not the total expenditure, but yearly basis.
Yeah.
Compare it to Iraq or Afghanistan.
I'm sure you did that last year, saying this has been more. It costs more America than 20 years of Afghanistan. That was last year. You know.
Well, not 20 all at once. I think it was about a little over 3 trillion what we spent in the war on terror. But right now we're officially, even just what they admit, it's around 117 billion. But a lot of people are saying, even a lot of Republican candidates who would know because they're on those Senate committees, saying it's closer to 200 billion. And the Democrats stonewall every vote for an audit, because if there was an audit, we would know how much they're actually spending. And
that was so surreal to me, just to find out where the money's going. No, we can't have that.
That's a lot of it's going to themselves.
That's what it is.
It goes to Ukraine and then to FTX and then back into their own pockets.
Oh, that was that Bangman Fried guy.
Yes.
I don't know where he's gotten up to.
Imagine funding a war that goes back to, well, I mean, imagine being a Republican who votes yes for funding for Ukraine that funds your own opposition. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'll tell you the dynamic in Congress over the past couple of days. You know, the speaker, the Republican speaker, because you have a majority in the House of Representatives of Republicans as of the 2022 election.
McCarthy, right?
Yeah, McCarthy.
Mm-hmm.
He is the speaker because he put together a coalition among the Republican members of Congress and some Democrats, I think, I don't remember for sure, that included a group of that they call hard right group, Marjorie Taylor Greene and some others. They have decided that there's like 8, 10, 12 of them, no more money for Ukraine. And so as they're trying to authorize a federal budget, they basically have declared, we're not going to support this. And if you do, if you let this go out of here with funding for Ukraine, you're not going to be speaker anymore. That's kind of been this drama that's been going on the last few days here. And it's an interesting dynamic to watch because they've taken a really an absolutist position that doesn't seem like it's something they can negotiate from. Like either you're cutting off aid to Ukraine or you're haggling over how much. You know, it's a question about sort of like, would you sleep with me for $1 million? Yes, I think I would. How about $20? What do you think I am? We've already established that. We were just haggling over price. It's not like that kind of a dynamic.
Interesting. I thought it was just McCarthy who shot down Zelensky, who wanted to address Congress, and McCarthy said no, but he had no other choice but to say no.
I mean, he might have done that as theater for a battle over this other issue.
Because part of his agreement, I'm sorry, go ahead, Don.
No, just like here's a concession.
Well, as a part of his agreement with Gates and Marjorie Taylor Greene and those guys is that it only takes one. He can be dismissed as Speaker of the House because of on almost a whim. I can't remember the details of it, but it only takes one person voting against him or in some kind of context for him to be out as Speaker. So and he had to agree to that to get them to agree to other measures in the Congress prior to that. So they have tremendous leverage in that regard.
Yeah.
We have to keep in mind that this is all political. This has nothing to do with peace in Ukraine or anything.
Oh yeah. This is all politics.
Yeah. This reminds me of a Russian joke. If you want to hear it.
Go ahead.
Sure.
All right. So there's a family sitting at the dinner table, a mother, father, son, and daughter, all four of them sitting at the and the son asks his father, Papa, what's the difference between potential and actually? And the father says, well, here, I'll show you. So he asks the mother and the daughter, so would you sleep with someone for $1,000? They say, well, maybe, okay, probably yes. And he tells his sons, well, see, we have 2 potential prostitutes, but don't actually have any money. So that's the difference between. We have a potential for, the Republicans, growing a pair and saying no more. But as of actuality, we don't. As of right now, we have nothing.
It's good politics to try to albatross of Ukraine and blame it all on Biden. I mean, it's great politics because the American people aren't happy. They see how Ukraine is getting all this attention and all these funds, whereas Maui is not. We got all these homeless, and that's just a real easy political populist position to take. But the thing is, they leverage these these popular positions, and then once they're in power, they just switch hats and they reverse. And then the Democrats will be the anti-war, and the Republicans will forget about everything they did. That's just the cycle that perpetuates itself over and over and over again. Kind of like Duff was pointing out here. Don't believe the fake anti-establishment.
Oh yeah, we never believed that they were dubs suddenly. I think they have pockets to watch.
But it's good politics, and it's interesting to watch. And
can I bring in just another piece of theater, which I'm sure of it in my region?
Please.
There was I don't remember which boat.
Don gave us an hour, his golden voice and his wisdom, and we really appreciate him coming. But he's got bigger fish to fry, so he's going to go meet with Zelensky right now.
Pleasure to have you.
Yes.
I enjoyed speaking with you guys, all of you, and I hope we get to do this again. On the question of a golden voice, my wife used to say I had a face made for radio.
Oh, come on. You have similar wives to Carlo Pacelli right there.
I take care, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Don.
Bye, Don. Thanks.
I really wanted to ask him about India. Too late for that. But on the subject of another thing, now that Poland has pretty much thrown Ukraine under the bus, there's this trilateral thing after the UN meeting in New York, and the one called Nozida, something like nausea. One of the Baltic midgets, I think the Lithuanian president, could be the Estonian, I don't know. The Nozida guys, they're doing a photo shoot of them holding hands, and we'll work out our little differences. That's theater, exactly the same as what was just described in the US Congress. Final topic, unless we can go freeform from here on in. I just wanted to talk about India at some point, but you look like you wanted to say something, Ian.
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, ultimately, because I have this debate with people on social media too, and on the blog, this debate of, is the war just going to fizzle out? Are we just going to bail and shift to the Pacific with Taiwan, or what are we going to do? Well, I can't believe it because, it's been almost 80 years of Cold War, movies, books, Tom Clancy, all of that stuff about how we're going to beat Russia. I mean, are we actually going to have a very clear, direct confrontation with them and us and lose it? Are we going to be able to just walk away from a fight you clearly lost after multiple generations of fantasizing about kicking their ass? Are we going to be able to do that? I don't think we can. I think they're going to keep escalating it until something really bad happens, because I don't see these people who've spent their whole lives fantasizing about this moment and getting their asses kicked and just having the sense to walk away from it. I just don't see them having that sense.
A scary thing is you could be right. I'll bring in an author later, but I wanted to say that there's also signs to the contrary. A lot of the blame game has been shifting towards Ukraine, saying, look, you didn't follow our instructions, all the great NATO training, and you didn't do what we told you. And a lot of it looks like, well, we didn't lose, NATO didn't lose. It's the silly Ukrainians who didn't follow. So there was already a blame being prepared. If this thing collapses, well, it's not our fault. I think that's the Biden perspective. There's been a bunch of that news, if you recall, saying, oh, but it's the weather. Oh, they didn't follow. They didn't do the combined arms things that we suggested.
The combined arms.
They keep going on with these. So there was that. I was wondering, because you read, Tom Clancy, have you read Dale Brown?
I've heard the name.
But with the Air Force. I was a kid when Dad had these books, and it's amazing right now looking at the world. Those books, it was, we're going to fuck up China with nukes. There's a dispute. I know the Spratly Island, the disputed island between the Philippines, China, and I think Vietnam, because of these bloody books. It was already there when I was like yay high, these bloody books. So yeah, it's been a lifetime of these fantasies. You're right about that. Could go either way. We'll see.
Yeah, there's the signs are going both ways. You could believe, it seems like the ATACMS is an inevitability, just like everything else, right? Because no, we're not going to send this, and then they send it. No, we're not going to send this, and they send it. And so you would think that the ATACMS would be no different. But then again, maybe Ian's right. Maybe Putin
maybe
made
they
it
pushed
clear,
the button.
Moscow made it clear that, hey, that's a red line, and you don't want to cross it, and so they won't. But time will tell.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
Ian, the Moscow perspectives. Let's see if you agree. One thing I am certain of right now, this sort of freezing the conflict and then they can rebuild Ukraine to attack again, Moscow is never going to accept that. What do you think?
I said this in March and April of last year. This is if Washington and NATO are going to have this end this on a favorable footing. This is the best time to do, because that was when Russians got spooked, when they realized this was not going to be a quick and easy police action. It was going to be a dragged out fight, and they did not feel. If you look at their news and what they were all saying back then, they did not feel prepared to weather these actions, to weather a full-scale war. They did not have anywhere close to the troop levels or the equipment. They did not feel prepared. That was the time to really, if we wanted to freeze the conflict in our terms.
Before the partial mobilization, before the.
Now they're just getting stronger. And the thing is, they have spent so many lives to get.
And they bring in new technologies,
yes,
new drones.
So, for them, it's even going to be the lives at this point. So at this point, they're in a very strong position to just, and that's why if you look at even the Moscow mouthpieces, there's been nothing about, not even a word about negotiating basically since last October or November, when they were just like, okay, it's on our terms. And what's really interesting about this, I'll tell you about, I'll give you one name in particular. So there's a retired General Stephen Twitty, an American general. I actually used to work under him. He retired and became one of these consultants. And I remember reading some interview he did. And it was actually he's of course pro-Ukraine, but it's pretty sensible. He was like, and he said this, I think this was like back in April or May of last year. It's like, if Ukraine is in the strongest position right now, they should negotiate now, when they're in a strong position, before they get into a weak position. And what's interesting is he kind of flip-flopped. He himself flip-flopped later. I think because he needed to keep getting attention. You have to toe the line all the way to even get an interview these days. But I think what even pro-American and pro-Ukraine sources were saying back then turned out to be true. That was the time to talk. Now it's too late. It's too late. And the frozen conflict does not at all benefit Russia, does not benefit Russians in the former Ukraine, doesn't benefit Russia itself.
No, it's unacceptable to Russia. That's what I'd say.
Yes, so they're not going to accept a frozen conflict. It's
delusional. They've done this dance before with Minsk 1 and 2. Sorry, go ahead, Billy Bob.
I learned yesterday on Dima, the military summary channel, he alluded to MI6 intelligence saying that, we know where the Russian counteroffensive is going to take place.
Yeah.
And it's coming shortly, within a few weeks, I believe. So, that would coincide with what you're saying, Ian, that it's, there's not going to be a freezing. There's going to be, Russia continuing to wage the war to win.
Yeah, there's no Korea freezing. I read that this morning. The US, the UK intelligence, they put out these daily little social media briefings. It was the upcoming Russian offensive.
They've been predicting that Russian counteroffensive for a while. And they were predicting the SMO altogether. It's a strategy of, I'm going to predict something happens every day until it actually, by coincidence, happens that day. Then say, I told you it was going to happen by just saying it year after year. Yes.
No, that's true. That's a good point.
And despite the weather, what's Russia's choice other than to continue? I mean,
sit down and have a
more solid denouement than what exists now.
I don't think gaining more territory. I mean, they might. I can't read their minds, and they're not telling us, because unlike our side, they don't talk. They just do things. They don't talk about it. I don't necessarily see the benefit of taking more territory. They might just do this game of grinding down foreign mercenaries and foreign equipment until the money runs out. And then it's not going to matter, because if the war ends and Ukraine just asking, okay, what are your terms? It won't matter at that point where the front line is. It could be right where it is now, or it could be outside of Kyiv. It doesn't make a difference where the front line is when that happens.
Ian, what do you think of the suggestion that Ukraine could become a second Israel?
Max Blumenthal.
I think that's Zelensky himself said that too. I think it's wishful thinking. Because Israel has that nepotism and has that it's very, very, because one, they just have a lot of Jew. I mean, not. I mean, the thing is that the two groups are not, the same. Not all Jews like Israel are very against Israel. But there's a lot of Jews in the USA that like Israel, support Israel. Our political establishment is moneyed. Not only does it have that nepotism, it also has a lot of money for Israel. Ukraine is a little bit like Israel in that sense, because there are a lot of ethnic Ukrainians that came to America. So they do have that in common with Jews, but not nearly the numbers and not nearly the influence. So this idea that Ukraine is going to become a great, and also we have to remember, and also the thing about Israel is they are not an enemy of Russia. Israel was never that stupid, even when they cut away from Stalin and kind of had that divorce with him. They did not outright make the Soviet Union or Russia their enemies. They've always been very careful about that, which Ukraine wasn't. So
I mean, I
hope that answers your question, Carlos.
They have
Christian.
They have Chrystia Freeland and they have Victoria Nuland. I think both very much on the way out, but they don't have like a UPAC, like an APAC.
Yeah, the Ukrainian lobby is strong, and I mean, it coincides with the interests of the ruling establishment, and so that's the key. They coincide, but in itself, it doesn't have the power that the Zionist lobby does to influence politics to nearly the same extent.
Ooh, on that same point,
Yeah,
there was
yes,
another speech at the UN. It was Ibrahim Raisi, the leader of Iran, I think the prime minister, and he had a big speech. And the Israeli ambassador came in with some sort of a drawing, sort of a thing about women's rights or something, and he got escorted out. Doesn't matter. But a second video I saw among the halls of the UN building in New York was he met anti-Zionist rabbis. Basically Jewish people who are against Israel. And those people told him, subtitled, obviously, I don't speak neither Persian nor Yiddish, but it was, we never had an issue with the Jewish people, nor did they in Iran. A lot of the Jewish faith has equal rights in Iran. We have a huge issue with Zionism.
They're constitutionally protected. Their religion is.
And the state of Israel, which I thought was important. And one more thing, Carlo, he brought in a new world. We've heard about de-dollarization, but in his speech, he mentioned that this whole unipolar, the rules-based order is already dead. The forced Americanization of the world has failed. Like, we have a new phrase, de-Americanization from Ibrahim Raisi. But
Thank
go,
God.
Carlo.
I have to go.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, of course. Enjoy your lunch with Mr. Green Goblin.
Yeah, okay. How do I get out of this? Just press on my image and
I can let me
close the window.
just take me out.
If you close the window on your end, or that.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay. Well, do we have some other slides, Ben? I thought you had a few slides prepared.
I had 4, but we pretty much covered them, some of them lightly. But I have one more topic that I'm not very knowledgeable about, but it's been obvious to me that something is really flaring up between Canada and India. And I'm wondering, maybe Ian or maybe Billy Bob is a little bit better.
I didn't even know there was an issue. There's a conflict between Canada and India.
Man, it's big. What do you call him? I always want to say Macron. That's the French guy, but it's Justin Trudeau.
Yes.
Sort of, he implicated
Fidel Castro's son. Yes.
Yes, Mr. I always hate that because Fidel is a hero, and this guy is. I hate him more than anybody. But he pretty much implicated the Indian. What do you call it? Not Secret Service, but the intelligence agencies in killing a Sikh leader somewhere in Canada, who is one of these separatists who wants to carve out a part in India. And then they they mutually got rid of each other's top diplomats. They just, the two countries. The two countries, basically, the trade talks have been completely frozen. India has suspended visa services for Canadian citizens. Canada has reduced the staff in the Delhi embassy. And right now, there's apparently, this is according to India Times, a Modi close thing, but the Indians are calling and protesting to boycott Canadian goods altogether. So what I want to share is I saw a meme. I wish I put it on a slide, but I didn't. It was from Global Times, the Chinese Communist Party's magazine. And it was, the classic meme of someone wanting to hit 2 buttons and thinking what to do. And this is old ally who represents, US values, Canadian flag. And new friend, the great brown hope against China. What do I push? And that's what it feels like. It doesn't look good from Joe Biden's point of view, because which one do you pick? But it was very interesting to me, and I can't read a lot more into it. It's fresh.
So Biden, I mean, he did say that he thought Canada's accusations were plausible or something like that.
Something, yes. Canada has plausible accusations. Maybe that was the word. Yeah.
So they didn't weigh in too heavily. The U.S. hasn't weighed in too heavily because obviously they need India as part of their anti-China strategy, and Canada, of course, is
in August.
puppet.
In August.
What's that?
Yeah, AUKUS, the Five Eyes,
yeah.
all of that, the anti-China stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think you're right, Billy. They're just, even just now hearing about it, I think that's the logical response, to not take sides. And I don't think the USA needs to take a side in that, because I don't think India or Canada themselves are looking for an excuse to start a fight with the USA.
Here's a question.
There's no reason.
Here's a question. Why who did this? I don't think India has the goal to do this in Canada, to just execute maybe a political opponent or something. Why would they do that now? I don't understand this event is my basic.
And why would Canada even care? Like, they don't care. Why make a thing out of it? I mean,
they made a big thing out of it. So.
Yeah, no, they did. They did. Yeah, I mean, I get why they would, even if it harms Western unity. I still get why they would make a thing out of it.
Oh yeah.
But the fact that it is harming Western unity, it becomes a problem then for the U.S. And so, but we'll see how it plays out. I imagine they'll patch things up and move on, like the Khashoggi thing, right? We had to pretend, hey, that's abominable, and we don't like you doing that. But the bottom line, it doesn't really hurt U.S. geopolitical interest that Khashoggi was killed, but they didn't like it. But they want to work through that now and put it behind them and get back to that relationship they had with Saudi Arabia. But it's too late because China's already stepped in.
Yeah, man. I mean, what we're going to see in the coming weeks, there's definitely, let's call them not fault lines, but there's cracks in the middle of Europe, in the famed unity of allies. There's cracks even in the big Atlanticist powers, like as you see with India, Canada. It's just a lot of South America is at the UN was going full multipolar. I mean, just to bring out two quick examples for the end. AMLO from Mexico, yes, and Lula of Brazil. They didn't talk about fucking Zelensky and all that Ukraine stuff. They said, look at the World Bank, look at the IMF and how lopsided their development funds have been going. And they said, we need to reform those. They were in, that's very anti-America discussion. They were talking about it's dominated by these world powers. So major point for me is these are the beginnings of, I think, huge cracks. And the big thing, the catalyst is Ukraine. It has been, but we'll see if it's a collapse.
You've got a slide for me. Should I pop it up or?
No, I think we've had all four. This is just on screen.
I haven't shown this. Oops.
I stopped sharing. Oh, did you just?
You showed Putin shaking hands with somebody, and I don't think I had shown that one yet.
Oh,
that was the foreign minister, the Chinese foreign minister. We did talk about it, but I don't think I showed the clip.
We did quickly, so I'll share again, and you can bring it on screen because that is Wang Yi. Who had, I mean, this is just a quick rundown. He had a meeting in Malta in Europe with Blinken. And immediately within one day, he ran to Moscow and talked to Lavrov before Lavrov went to the UN. So he was well apprised of everything. Then he talked to the intelligence guy. The last time I blanked on him, and I'm going to Nikolai Patrushev, intelligence and security guy. And now today he's meeting Putin in Petrograd, Leningrad, St. Petersburg.
He invited Putin to meet with Xi in October, right? Xi?
October is when this is all in preparation of Putin's October visit to Xi Jinping in China. So the big, what's come out of this meeting so far isn't a lot, but we are in full agreement with the multipolarity, the rules-based order. It's already dead. That was part of the real diplomacy going on in part of the world while this show took place in New York. So that's why that slide was included. But yeah, I think I hope it was mostly informative, but we got through a bunch of hits topics and events. Yeah. I wanted to know anything you want to throw in, any thoughts near the end here?
It's good discussion. Thanks again for having me on.
Yeah.
Okay.
You too. And one of these days we have to talk about Belarus because we already know that that's one of your heartfelt topics, and I am kind of mine too in the last 2 years.
So, Ian, hang out after the program, and we'll discuss some things backstage. I'm I can't think of any other topics to touch on. Ben, you're good?
I'm good. I'm just going to say thank you for anyone who watched, and please like, share, subscribe, the usual panache.
Yeah, we had some great guests today, a great discussion. We'll be back on Tuesday for episode 19 of the Blowback Roundtable. Thank you, everyone.